Hi, everyone. Welcome to our April. Oops. Let's see here. Just me. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our. Oh, why is it? Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our April 2021 WellNurse Spotlight. My name is Charlene Platon, CEO and co-founder of WellNurse, and we are so excited to welcome you all today to our Spotlight for April 2021. And WellNurse is on a mission to empower nurses to be their best selves, and so we host these spotlights to highlight nurses and their journeys of self-care and well-being, and also to highlight the diverse profession of nursing. And so for today's spotlight, we have our co-founders on the call, and they will be able to screen questions that are mentioned during our spotlight today. And this is a live stream conversation, so we are actively live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And so feel free to drop in any questions or comments during the duration of this conversation. And so we will do our best to respond to any questions or comments that you may have. And now we would like to start by introducing our co-founders. So first, I would like to introduce Kathy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Schaefer, co-founder of WellNurse. I'm an associate professor in nursing as well as a compassion fatigue professional.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And Jillian?
WellNurse and also a nurse. I've worked in a variety of settings and I am finishing up a graduate degree to become a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Thanks for joining us.
Great, thank you. And now we would like to introduce our guest for today. We are so excited to announce that our April 2021 WellNurse Spotlight guest is Marie Shanahan, MA, BSN, RN, HNBC. And Marie Shanahan is the founder and president of the BirchTree Center for Healthcare Transformation. She is board certified in holistic nursing and has consulted to healthcare organizations since 1998, helping them to develop caring cultures and healthy environments with a strong focus on nursing self-care, vitality, and resilience. Her experience includes clinical, administrative, and educational roles. She was co-principal investigator for a 2-year Robert Wood Johnson Foundation research study establishing the link between holistic nursing and improved RN retention and patient satisfaction in an acute care hospital. She has served as the treasurer on the board of directors for the American Holistic Nurses Association, or AHNA, and was also awarded the 2016 Holistic Nurse of the Year. And together with her teaching partner, Dr. Vita Andrus, they have trained over 10,000 nurses in holistic nursing and are responsible for over 60% of the board certified holistic trained nurses in the country. Their integrative healing arts program curriculum was acquired by the AHNA in 2018 as the organization's national and international course preparation for holistic nursing practice. She currently resides in Western MA, where she refuels with yoga, art, music, and family time. So without further ado, thank you so much, Marie, for being here today.
Thank you, Charlene and Kathy and Jillian, and it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Wonderful. So, oops, sorry, there's a little bit of, okay, let's see here. All right, so let's get started. And so, Marie, we are so interested in your diverse background. You know, you have so much great experience and you've done amazing work throughout your profession. And we are first really interested in what led you to the path of holistic nursing. You know, how did you know that this was the area of nursing practice that you wanted to be in and be a part of?
That's a great question. Well, I guess when you've been in nursing as long as I have, which is I'm now in my 4th decade of nursing, you get to try on a lot of different hats and walk a lot of different paths. So that's kind of a broad question, and I'll try to bring it down. But I want to start off by saying that my background, I came into nursing really interested in the ICU and the kind of the emergency room, acute care, anything that was really kind of had a high level of energy and required you to be sort of a type A person, which I feel that I am a recovered type A person. And I really just like the excitement, and I like the synergy of bringing together knowledge and skills and the acuity of the patients and making a difference. And as time went on, though, as I was in that field, what I really started to have a conflict with was some of the ways in which the mind, body, and spirit were getting sort of separated, and in some ways, just the focus was on the body. And of course, when you're in an acute care setting and it's a life and death, obviously that focus is appropriate. And then later, though, I started to realize that there was a spiritual component to that care and a mental component to that care in the ICU that I felt at the time in the teaching environment that really had lost a lot of its focus, and it was starting to weigh heavy on me as a nurse, because I've always had that integrated perspective. As a child, I always felt intuitive, always had a kind of a compassionate sense towards others when they were in pain or they were suffering. And so it was important to me to kind of bring those worlds together. But what really crystallized it for me was my own personal journey. I found myself being a single mom with a 4-year-old, and kind of rewriting my story as a single mom and as a nurse without a partner, and beginning to look at life sort of from a different way. And what was important to me at that time, though, was I wanted to do well in all areas. I wanted to do well as a nurse. I wanted to do well as a mom. I also wanted to be healthy. So I started looking for ways to bring more balance into my life. And I started exploring things like nutrition and exercise and meditation and yoga, which at that time, 4 decades ago, really was not very, well, it was different than it is today, where there's so much focus on well-being and self-care. So it was a little bit of an exploratory journey at that time, and I was lucky enough to find the American Holistic Nursing Association, which came to be in the 80s, and by the time I found it in the late 80s, and really got involved in things in the late 80s and early 90s, the organization was just forming and really coming into its own. So I felt fortunate. I felt I found my tribe, or at least my nursing home, if you will. And my interest in holistic nursing continued to grow once I became a member.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And in speaking about holistic nursing, can you tell us, are there any specific theoretical underpinnings of holistic nursing that it's based upon, or tell us more about that, and also the different settings that where you might find holistic nurses?
Sure, that's a great question. I love that you talk a little bit about theory, because that is my area that I teach in our programs. And like a lot of nurses, I think initially we get exposed to theory in our training programs, in our doctoral work, or other even at the baccalaureate level. And I think there's a little bit of resistance in nursing to just owning and really adopting those theoretical frameworks. Now, I may be the odd duck in that way, but I love nursing theory because I believe that it really creates a framework for us to expand our unique body of knowledge. And nursing has so many wonderful ways in which we accomplish patient care and the different settings that we practice in. But what's unique about holistic nursing theory is that it's applicable across all settings. Holistic nursing practice is practiced in all settings, everything from acute care to outpatient to even in my entrepreneurial journey. I still use all of the theoretical underpinnings that I learned about in holistic nursing. So I want to mention 3 that are kind of at the top of my list, and one would be Jean Watson's work. She used to call it notions about holistic nursing, or notions about nursing, back in the 80s, and of course now she is an international nursing superstar with all that she has done. And then there's Martha Rogers and her focus on the environment that we bring to the patient, and our personal energy and how we infuse that into our nursing care. And then Margaret Newman, who I met and had just wonderful, incredible conversations. And her ideas around the idea of expanding consciousness and help as this this notion that as we learn more, we use more. As we learn more, we expand our consciousness more. And so that our work as holistic nurses is really to help educate and expand the consciousness of a person. So the three of them together, again, Watson's focus on caring and compassion, theoretical underpinnings from Rogers around energy and environment, and then Newman's focus on consciousness and patterns and how we can really help patients with their aha moment rather than being so super directive that we tend to be in our allopathic models. The three of those pieces came together for me, and I feel that I'm trans-theoretical. I also love Barbara Dossey's work. She's gone into nurse coaching with her integral work. I love modeling and role modeling through Helen Erickson, and there's a lot of others. I mean, Kristen Swanson does a beautiful job with caring. There's Kolkaba and comfort care. So it's kind of like my niche. I borrow from everybody. Myself and my teaching partner, Vita Andrews, who you mentioned earlier, we've taken a lot of that and created a holistic theoretical model for leadership in nursing. So I think that you pull all of your influences together, you know what your strengths are, you know what your areas of interest are, and I think that those are what brings you to your own kind of trans-theoretical knowledge and practice space. Now, I want to say, just your second question was about where do holistic nurses practice? The answer is everywhere and anywhere, because holistic nursing at its base starts with the philosophical belief that mind, body, and spirit are united and they're integrated. And so therefore, wherever we practice, we bring all of that to bear, whether it's mother-baby or it's behavioral health, or it's flight nursing, or it's community nursing. There is a way in which philosophically we see that as united and connected and functioning in an integrative pattern. So we don't separate those out, we see the whole person. And the other piece that goes with that is, as nurses, we're people, we're persons, and so we're whole, we're united, we're integrated, and so we regard ourselves in that way as well. We can become that therapeutic environment for people simply by how we bring ourselves to a situation. And then, of course, we can add in things like modalities, which we could probably talk about in a separate question or conversation, but that's an important part of it as well. So really, holistic nursing has value in every setting, and every nurse not necessarily is a holistic nurse in skill set, but in mindset, they can definitely be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Marie. You had a lot of great points that you brought up, and I'm so glad to hear about all the different pioneers who have been a part of the space, who've really led this space, because I know even though you've been part of this work for so long, it seems like it's still being adapted now. So that's really awesome to see that it's been an ongoing progress that nurses have been contributing in this profession and in this part of nursing. And I just want to hear more about your experience with being the founder and CEO of the BirchTree Center for Healthcare Transformation. I really would love to hear, we talk a lot about entrepreneurship and business and innovation in our spotlights because we do like to expose nurses to the different facets and the different modes of nursing, and that includes business ownership. And so could you tell us about that as well? And, how did you come to, from that point of, being a nurse, perhaps in a clinical setting, to wanting to take the leap of faith into starting your own business, integrating holistic nursing and these other transformative aspects that you've talked about? We'd love to hear more about that.
Thanks, Charlene. So I started my first business about 26 years ago. And at that time, I had been studying as a Reiki practitioner, and I obtained my Reiki master, which allowed me to teach. So I was able to create a business that I could teach other nurses about Reiki, teach them how to practice it, and I could also offer Reiki to healthcare professionals, to patients, and to the general public. So that's how I got started. It was a pretty modest start because a lot of people did not know about Reiki at that time. And so there was a lot of getting out into the community, going to a lot of health fairs, letting people know what it is, giving away a lot of work, which as entrepreneurs, we do that initially so people can get a sense of who we are, especially if we're kind of breaking ground with something new. And that I did that for 5 years as I was also transitioning into building the BirchTree Center. Now, the interesting thing I think about the BirchTree Center is where it is now and where it started are two very, very different places. If you had told me early in my life I was going to be a CEO, I would have just laughed because I had and to some degree, I still have an old-fashioned view of what a CEO is, which is usually that it's male and that it's heading a big structured company, and that you have to climb your way to the top, all that kind of thing. Well, what's wonderful about nursing entrepreneurs is we have rewritten all those old rules, and we have created our own version of what a CEO is. And also, to be honest, a CEO, when you're first starting off, you're doing everything. So you're learning all the jobs that eventually you will delegate to others one day. And I think that gives you a good sense of really how to structure your business, when the right time is to bring others aboard. And also really, the job well enough, but you also have to let go of the job so that others can do it well and expand it. So being a CEO is an interesting process for me. I now, at 21 years later at the BirchTree Center, I feel very differently about the role. I went into creating the BirchTree Center because I had frustrations at that clinical level. What I was talking about earlier, where I felt that the mind, body, and spirit, especially in a teaching environment, which is where I did most of my clinical careers, is there just was a lot of focus on the physical, and I really wanted to see the mental, emotional, psychological, and social needs of people really as part of their care. So getting outside of that structure allowed me to explore that in my own way. I had background in administrative teaching and clinical spaces by that time, so I kind of knew how to speak to people in those roles and what their priorities were. And it allowed me then to really kind of have this, I don't know if I would use the word safety, but the freedom to explore things and make mistakes and also learn what the market needed. And all of those pieces all coming together to help me learn. I definitely went from being an expert in the clinical space and teaching space to being a novice and getting comfortable with not knowing everything, getting comfortable with making mistakes, getting comfortable with having to ask for help, and really put myself out there as somebody who didn't know everything, because in ICU you're expected to master things right away, and in the dialysis area as a leader and an educator, you have to master things. So having the freedom to not know it all but learn, that was a big part of my journey. And I now, here we are 21 years later. As you mentioned in my introduction, a portion of my company has been acquired. Again, something that I didn't envision early on. And who knows, we're going into our third decade of being in the BirchTree Center, and we have lots of plans and new ideas, and it's exciting. So where I'll be in another 10 years, hard to say. Have I been having a blast? Absolutely. Nurse entrepreneurship is, I think you have to have a certain freedom in your heart and a little bit of a risk. You have to be risk friendly. But it really has been a wonderful process for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marie, for sharing your experience with us. Becoming the CEO and founder of a company that, for it to still be up and running 30 years later or up to your third decade is really remarkable. And I think being able to make that jump in your nursing career really says a lot, especially in this space that I feel like is just now starting to really get that momentum. And I think you mentioned a few times during this conversation already that in this field in healthcare, there is a lot of focus on the body and the physical parts of well-being rather than emotional, mental, and a lot of that ties in. Looking at all of that ties in a lot with holistic nursing. And what are your thoughts? I also have a lot of questions too about BirchTree, but what are your thoughts as to why there's been so much focus on only really primarily the physical well-being of healthcare and of patient care? Any thoughts about that, or why that focus is there rather than the mental and emotional side?
Yeah, I think, healthcare in general, there's more comfort at looking at pathology that you can name, see, and treat. Um, Probably my colleagues in behavioral health would say that, um, it's easier for them to kind of figure out a diagnosis and place it in a box, if you will, and take the established treatment path. When we as our consciousness as people expands, it becomes really clear that people don't want that. They want to be seen as who they fully are, and they want to be recognized as having a social emotional component to their experience of healthcare. So I think in some ways we've gotten used to it. We have and I say we meaning healthcare providers, the healthcare system. I think the biggest weakness in our healthcare system is that we think that we run the show and that we should design the healthcare system to accommodate us as healthcare providers and institutions and systems. And I say that as a systems thinker. And yet what we have realized is, as something I read about 2 weeks ago was CVS has decided in the San Francisco Bay Area to start building affordable housing because they have realized that the social determinants of health play a big part in how people will function in a healthcare system, but also be able to, to follow through with their treatment. So we're starting to, some of the edges are starting to get a little blurry now, and we're starting to realize we have a big job in healthcare, and it's not just about fixing the body. It's about understanding the human and all of the elements of a human's needs. I think that when we start to really relate to people on an emotional level, see them in their family space or not, if they don't have family, then we can make changes to their healthcare recommendations and regimens that are more realistic and start to address some of those emotional needs. I was reading recently that there is a recommendation for a type of probiotic that when taken on a regular basis addresses the microbiome and is known for reducing anxiety. So here we now see that real integrated whole, the mind and the body, the anxiety and the gut, the gut disturbance and in the gut flora coming together. We're starting to realize, we're really not separate. But, we could go back to Newtonian times when, we separated mind and body. We can go back further than that. When mind and body, the body went to the physician, the mind or the soul went to the priest or the pastor. So we have a long tradition in society, in healthcare, of keeping them separate. I think that's really changed now, or in process of changing.
Right. Thank you so much, Marie. And you brought up a lot of great input and insight there. And I actually didn't realize that about the probiotic. I've heard about probiotics helping for a lot of various reasons. And it's just so interesting to hear that there is a link too between the gut flora and anxiety. So that's really, really remarkable. And, I was wondering as well, we've been talking a lot about personal well-being, emotional well-being too. And something that we've really grown to be interested in is organizational well-being in healthcare. And we know that there is a lot of opportunities when it comes to improving our healthcare culture, destigmatizing mental health and well-being for our practitioners and our clinicians. And in terms of BirchTree, we want to hear more about what programs does BirchTree offer to support healthcare organizations as they are supporting their healthcare professionals.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. I think you said something very important, which is to destigmatize healthcare providers seeking the kind of support that they really need. I think I am kind of a glass half full, and I am a silver lining gal. I knew that this year was going to be a tough year. We all realized how incredibly tough it's been. And at the same time, the silver lining that's come out of it is that the recognition that physicians, nurses, other healthcare providers, auxiliary help that support us, our supportive studies, our supportive people behind, sort of the ones that do all the background for us. Anybody who's working in healthcare has been really impacted by things that are happening this in 2020 and in COVID. And I don't think we're post-COVID yet. I definitely think we're still intra-COVID. And so the silver lining is that we're now acknowledging that we are not invincible, which is a narrative I think that has been going on in nursing for way too long, and we've perpetuated it. And I think that we're recognizing that performance and joy and vitality in life are the things that really bring us good performance at work. And so that balance, that work-life balance, and I have to credit so many of the newer generation of nurses for ringing the bell on that and saying, this is really what we expect, this is what we want, because in my generation, not so much. We were willing to sort of, just fall down and, die on the spot if need be. I mean, that's an exaggeration, of course, but we set up a pattern in which nurses just taking time for themselves, working a reasonable amount of hours per week, taking meals, getting rest time. We set it up so that, we don't need that. We don't need that. We'll just ultimately, push on and we're here for the patient. We have to really redefine that. We have to look at that. We have to also look at performance, because performance definitely suffers when we are overstressed and we have passed that stress threshold. So a lot of the program that we do, whether it's with leaders and leadership training or acute care, chronic care, whatever it is, whatever the setting, we always start with the basics of taking good care of yourself. And that needs to start initially with yourself at home. Setting up the pattern at home so that you get the kind of rest that you need, you bring back the joy that makes your world exciting and fun to be in, and that feeds you. And then we talk about programs that, in our programs, I should say, we talk about getting clear on our purpose. What is your purpose? Do you remember it? Why did you go into this profession? And what do you need to do to feed that meaning and purpose, to keep it front and center? Sometimes it will mean changing your job. Sometimes it will mean leaving the profession for a little while. Now, I don't encourage mass exodus. That's the last thing that we really need. But we do need to sometimes pause and see what is important to us and where we may have lost our way. And then changing organizational culture is a big job. So you need a lot of champions in an organization. And we work on that. Our programs are geared to developing the champions that really will do the internal work, will be the role models, will be the ambassadors of good care, good self-care, because they're really intertwined. One of our programs is called Safe Care is Self-Care. Self-care is safe care. It's an interchangeable process. We do another one called Reawakening the Heart, Caring and Renewal in Nursing Practice. And those two programs are really about building that foundation in not only holistic nursing, but with a big focus on renewal and self-care. We have a longer program where we really train folks to be that internal experts, and We like to get a deep bench within each organization so that they really have lots of people from various different aspects of the organization that can, through their particular lens or area of influence, can build that culture into one in which self-care, compassion, caring, and quality are all intertwined and all part of a good work experience and also part of a good patient experience. So we have a number of programs that do all that. And they also concurrently prepare people for holistic practice and prepare people for board certification, because all of this is wonderful, but we also need to work towards metrics, and that helps change the culture as well. We're super aware that healthcare organizations are constantly being measured. Their reimbursement structure changes all the time. So being awake to that and playing well with that, being a collaborative partner so that the metrics that organizations need to function well, to rise to the top of their area, their market, whatever, and to deliver the kind of care that they're committed to. So we work on both sides of that equation, the nursing side, the physician side, but also the organizational side. So we're working with leaders to help them achieve their goals. And that's really an integrated model. That's what an integrated model is. It's not about trying to be everything to everybody. It's trying to connect the dots and helping people understand that when they put a focus on caring and collaboration and innovation, as a matter of fact, that all of the ripple effect of that is going to touch all the other areas and enhance all those other areas. So, how we enter into an organization is really where they want us to enter. We help them assess some of their needs. We help them assess their goals. Maybe they're ready to just dip their toe in and kind of explore what this is. We can do that for them. Are they ready to go and get into something that is, they've been dipping their toe, they're now really ready for the full court press? We can do that as well. But again, all of these things start with how are we talking to ourselves? How are we caring for ourselves? How are we caring for our teammates? Because that's part of how we see self-care as well. That it's an individual process, but it's also a team process. And that's how we get it embedded into a healthcare organization so that it becomes second nature for nurses and others to rest, to eat, to have breaks, and to have time with patients that is not just solely focused on doing something for them. Because I think that feeds practitioners as well. We want to have that relationship so that we can sit and listen. We can sit and soothe. We can sit and cry or pray, whatever is appropriate for that moment. But we can have that connection. I think that feeds, that still feeds me every time I'm with a patient or with a student or with anyone. It's very important to me to have that connection. And I think this kind of work allows that. It supports that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marie, for telling us more about the programs that are offered at BirchTree. And it is great to hear about how you do have your programs integrated into the healthcare organization and helping with the culture. And in speaking about the healthcare culture, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you work with the different organizations to see how they might want to start to implement some of these programs. Would you say that it's more of, is it implemented more of like an upstream approach versus a downstream approach? From your experience, do you see more of these organizations implementing programs, starting with the providers, or does it start more with, the top down kind of implementing these programs with metrics and with different things? We're just really curious to hear about that.
Sure. Yeah. And I for some reason, I was anticipating that question as you were speaking, because it's a both and. Very often we get called by grassroots, a nurse or a nurse manager, and not, in other words, not a big decision maker in the larger structure. Not to say that nurses or nurse managers don't make decisions, don't hear me wrong, but in terms of, pushing the culture, shifting or reshaping the culture, we'll often hear from folks who want us to come in maybe for Nurses Week, or to, they've had a change in their, unit leadership, or they've had a lot of turnover, and they want us to come in and do some work to sort of support their nurses. So often we have, we call it the grassroots effect. They get excited about it. They realize this is what they've been waiting for. They feel empowered to be able to do that, and that's a big part of what we like to do, is set up the programs, set up the work and the structure so that it can really lift off from that grassroots level. I think that kind of the mainstream way of thinking about how we make change in organizations is that it has to come from the top. There has to be, a big rollout, a big announcement, and get behind that. And that, in about 50% of our clients, that's not how it's happened. I might even say closer to 60%. It started from the bottom up. The results started to be local. Then people were curious, wanted to know, how did you do that? How did your unit, all of a sudden, your retention changed, your patient satisfaction scores changed? How did that happen? So we started at that local level. And curiosity is a wonderful factor. People want to know, what happened there? Or what are they doing over there? Oh, well, that's different. And so that always works into our benefit as an organization, as BirchTree. But it also works to the people that are living in that organization and that hold this desire for change. Then, we do a lot of national speaking, writing, that type of thing, and we get calls from CEOs, CNOs, others in the organization, sometimes from spiritual care department, saying, yeah, we're interested in that. Magnet, we're going for a magnet. We want to know a little bit more about how we can make some gains in that area. And so sometimes it does come from, the senior leadership, and we begin to work through the organization that way. I'd say to anybody who's considering doing this kind of work, you have to be nimble and have a, multi-pronged approach. Know what doors open. I always said, open the doors this would be my prayer, open the doors that need to be opened, close the ones that will not work, pull my foot out of the ones that are not working, that I'm trying to push, and go with that flow and that synergy. And so we're good listeners when we first are talking with an organization. We're really listening. What are they saying? Where's the challenge for them? What are their dreams and visions? What do they really hope for? And then we start to work from that space and begin to introduce that. And that really, for me, feels like then I'm working with a partner. Then I'm working with folks who we have share a vision, and I'm not hired as a hired outside consultant to kind of fix something that they haven't been successful at fixing. To me, that I run the other way when it comes to that kind of approach. So I really am looking for people like-minded, and they may not appear like-minded at first. So that's one thing I should say. But as you start to talk to them and you build those connections and those relationships, you realize, we're on the same page. They have their skill set and their area of expertise. I have mine. Our team has ours. Let's just get this going. Let's get the conversation going. I am a fan of starting small to let people absorb and begin the process of understanding that they too will be making some transformation, because culture is transformation, but it's one by one, person by person. They say an organization is when 2 or more people get together and try to do something. So it really is a personal process as well as a systemic and organizational process.
Yes, absolutely. And Marie, you mentioned a lot of great insight there, and something too. I'm glad to hear that a lot of the programs that you've launched and have done in these healthcare organizations a lot of them have been from the bottom up. And I am curious to hear from you as well in terms of the metrics that might have been created from healthcare organizations when it comes to this work. Have you found at all that any of the metrics that might be created by these organizations to measure well-being might be an impediment in any way to some of this work that's being implemented? And if so, do you have an example of that, or how we could, or just an example of how we could be more thoughtful when it comes to these metrics?
Yeah. The metrics that we tend to look at initially have to do with patient satisfaction, nurse satisfaction or employee satisfaction, and retention. And the reason is we start with those because those are the big ticket items where healthcare organizations spend a lot of money. And they're very interrelated, although when you typically meet with C-suite folks, there's often, oh, well, we have a retention committee and we have a patient satisfaction committee and we have quality and safety, but nobody's talking. They're not talking to each other. And so you find out, well, we've been doing this for retention, we've been doing this for patient satisfaction, and they need to be knitted together. So I would say those are some of the top ones. Our organization has more than several times been able to show a cost savings as well. So even though that's not what we typically lead with, because we have to kind of really understand what their structure is, we can save organizations millions of dollars by simply bringing together those three metrics and working with them as a whole. Now, some of the other metrics where you start looking at specifically provider well-being, there's all sorts of stress scales and other things like that. Those are sort of, I would layer them slightly below the ones that I just spoke about. And it's not because they don't hold great importance, it's because they are not necessarily getting talked about at the higher levels of an organization where you're designating economic resources. You do have to be awake to how organizations are designating their resources. So the chief nursing officer may feel like, yeah, my nurse stress level is through the roof. However, when he or she goes to have a conversation about it, it's going to be poured into a bigger pot to be looked at. Until we can drill down and find the perfect tool that says this specific measurement and this specific metric or benchmark is where we need to be in order for us to succeed with all these other pieces, I think that we're going to have to start at those larger metrics, be more awake to them, and a lot of nurses are not even aware what they look like, how they're measured, how often they're reported, how they relate to the reimbursement structure, how they relate to the standing in the healthcare setting, and other allocation of resources. So until there's more light on that, there's more exposure to that, I think folks are going to be a little stymied with that. Now, that said, I think that it's also really, really important for nurse managers to keep a really good pulse on where their team is at. And if that is through some surveys, whether it's unofficial, official, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a standardized tool, but some other way of having a regular relationship with where people are at, where you're actually soliciting information from them and understanding what their needs are, what their pain points are. I think that's really, really critical. That kind of data, while it may not be the bigger, data that I spoke about, but that kind of data compiled over a period of time will allow nurses, especially in unit level leadership, to be able to have a greater voice when it comes to saying something like, well, we need a renewal room because we're finding that nurses are just not getting their time to rest, or we're finding exhaustion. Like recently the ANA did a study on how nurses survived over 2020. They did the study in December of 2020, and 70% of nurses were saying they were exhausted. Now that's mind-blowing. Why aren't we doing something about that right away? Well, how does it play with the other metrics is part of the equation here. And I think, unfortunately, in healthcare, we like to push the envelope and wait till it's really in critical crisis mode before we're like, oh, we should do something. So we're getting there. We're getting better at it as a healthcare system. We're getting better at not waiting till that very moment where all of a sudden we have, mass exodus of nurses. But we have a long way to go. So I hope I've kind of answered it in a way in which you can say, yes, they're important, those kinds of metrics, but also they need to play with the other ones well.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for Marie for sharing about that. And And I do think it's important, the metrics that you mentioned. There's a lot of different ways that you can measure well-being, and I do think it could be a little challenging because well-being is so multifaceted, just like you mentioned. There is the organizational aspect, but there's also the individual aspect. And with that being said, we love to ask guests on our spotlights about their own journeys of wellness and well-being, and about their self-care practices. And we just love to share that with other nurses and healthcare professionals who are listening. And so, could you tell us about your own journey of self-care and what practices you like to utilize when you are experiencing any challenges?
Thank you. That's a really important question. Well, I don't know if I'd call myself the self-care queen, because every day I have to push myself to do something for myself if I'm really busy with other things. I think that, my students ask me, oh, you're so into self-care. Well, I teach it, and they often say you teach what you need to learn, so I'll be open about that. The other thing is, I say to them, the difference between you and me is I commit to it. I am committed to my self-care, and it looks different based on different situations. So that I have go-tos, and that includes good nutrition. I do supplement my nutrition, and that varies from time to time. During COVID, I did a lot of vitamin D, and I did zinc, and I did melatonin for sleep. That is my big go-to, is getting enough rest and sleep, but also movement. And when we're traveling, that's a real challenge. We haven't traveled very much, obviously, because of the pandemic. So getting out and getting a lot of exercise, just getting out in nature. Nature is, whether I'm moving in nature or I'm sitting there listening to the birds, or recently I was able to capture, a bird starting to build a nest and then eventually lay a couple of eggs in it. And for me, that's it fills my soul. It makes me feel whole. It makes me feel part of a bigger, bigger world and part of the cosmos. Taking pictures, doing yoga, and then really connecting with the people in my life that I love. Having regular conversations that are beyond, like, what are you doing today? But just talking about things like, how do you feel about where you are in life in this moment? Or where do you think will be a year from now? What do you think will be important to explore, in another 6 months? Just fun things that get us beyond the day-to-day conversations. And I also like to pick something new. I am definitely an energy junkie. I haven't been able to get energy work since the pandemic, but when it's all clear and good to go, I'm getting back on that Reiki table, that craniosacral table. I want another reflexology treatment. All of those treatments, to me, are the way in which I maintain my health and well-being. I am a big consumer of acupressure and acupuncture. I go to a nurse acupuncturist, Eva Lunetta, in South Hadley, Massachusetts. Do a little shout out to her. She is a former ICU nurse and a wonderful acupuncturist, and now has become like a friend. I go in on the seasonal changes, because that's really the hardest part for the body mind in traditional Chinese medicine, to make that shift. So I like to go in and get, just what I call a tune-up. So those are kind of my go-tos.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Marie. And it's clear that you're very knowledgeable in a lot of different self-care practices. And I think it's interesting all the different ways that you've mentioned that you can practice self-care, because I think a lot of the times when you mention self-care, well-being, or wellness, people may just have one way that you to think about practicing that, right? They might just think, oh, you just have to sit in a quiet room and just be really still and clear your mind, and that's the only way that you could practice self-care, where in reality, it's actually a very diverse practice, and it could be very personal and very customized to yourself and your needs and who you are as an individual. And so, with that being said, too, I'm certain that you have an idea as well of what what healthcare as an industry and as an organization for individual organizations would look like if they did practice or have their professionals regularly practice self-care. But with that being said, if someone waved a magic wand and you were given 3 wishes on how you would magically change how self-care was approached by our healthcare industry, what would those wishes be? It's kind of an interesting question, but I'm just really wanting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think immediately of nursing school and medical school. I have a lot of friends that are physicians, and I think that we really put people through the ringer. And so if I waved my magic wand, the first thing I'd want them to do is learn about self-care from the very beginning and have it valued by the people who teach them. Have it be an integral part of how they learn about people, health, well-being, and care. And so they experience it right from the very beginning. My second magic wand would go to having it be on the NCLEX or on the medical exam, licensure exam, because I believe that once it gets there, it's going to be recognized that it's going to be taught in medical schools and nursing schools. You know, the cohort of nursing that is coming into now, for the most part, a lot of them are younger nurses, some second career nurses. They deserve this. They deserve to be in a profession that they can be in for their lifetime and get real joy out of it. We all deserve it. But think of the nurses that came in within the last year from when they graduated, and boom, they're in a pandemic. That's the formation of what happened to them when they had to run from the very beginning. Is it possible that they're suffering from PTSD? Yes, I do think it is possible. Nurses in my cohort and all the way through, Gen X and all of that, they definitely are showing the signs of what happened in this last year. So I feel especially, though, committed to seeing new generations of nurses come in and change the profession in that way, because they were taught that way and they were tested that way, because if it gets on the NCLEX, it's really probably considered a standard of good care. My third to fourth wish would be that it is something that is identified as a standard of care. Now, it is in holistic nursing. Self-care, self-awareness, and self-reflection are one of the 5 core values, and it's integrated through all of our standards of practice. So if we get to have something as a standard of practice and a standard of care in the clinical setting, then people will engage in it. People will see it as normal. People will feel that they should be accountable to that. That will be regarded as expert care, that we have this standard. And until we get there, I think we're still chasing it. I think we're still going around about how do we retain nurses? How do we improve performance? Well, we're missing a very key ingredient. So that would be my wishes. Nursing school, NCLEX, and then standard of care.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marie. I love to hear the different wishes that you had, and I'm really confident that it will come true, hopefully sooner rather than later. And, we on our team here at WellNurse, we really resonate with all those different aspects that you've mentioned, especially integrating into nursing schools and nursing programs, and then integrating it into professional practice, because those are 2 large gaps that we're really missing when it comes to having these areas of opportunity to introduce these practices to nurses, where they otherwise might not be exposed to this, and they otherwise might, in its current state, nurses, if they're interested in this work, they really have to do a lot of their own self-initiative in order to find these resources. So definitely really appreciate that insight, and I'm confident that those 3 will come true. And we really thank you for the work that you're doing to drive that forward as well. And we're almost at the end of the hour, which is really crazy. I feel like we could talk for so much longer. And the last question that we have today is, what would you recommend to healthcare organizations right now when it comes to promoting the well-being of nurses and their healthcare professionals in their organizations?
Yeah, I would say create an environment that allows nurses to do what they love to do, and the rest will follow. We have kind of reversed it. We've gotten it wrong. We have driven so much towards the patient environment without realizing that the patient environment is only as good as the nursing environment, because we're people too. Patients are people and they deserve the best care. Nurses are people and they deserve the best work environment. So if they focus on that and for a moment, not be afraid to just keep driving the same old, story and the same old conditions, but really focus on their teams and get to know their teams, I think they're going to accomplish all their goals. You cannot have a high-performing organization and meet all your goals if you leave out a critical part of what makes that successful.
Right, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that, Marie. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with nurses, healthcare professionals, or healthcare leaders who are on the call today? Any final words that you'd like to impart on our audience?
Say we met through being part of an innovation hackathon. And innovation is a word that gets thrown around a lot. But I will say one thing that I've learned about your group is that you really are innovative, and having a WellNurse app where nurses can really learn about self-care, connect with other nurses around self-care. I think that is really the future. We need to start looking at how do we reach nurses in those most immediate moments. And I applaud you on what you're doing with WellNurse. I think it's just the perfect time, and you guys are the perfect people to move that forward. So from one entrepreneur to other entrepreneurs, I wish you the greatest success. And I know that we all hold a vision for nurse self-care, wellness, and vitality and joy. Enjoy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marie. We truly appreciate having you on our call today as our nursing spotlight. We truly appreciate you paving the way in promoting holistic nursing practice in our healthcare organizations and for our nurses out there. And so we would love to say thank you to everyone who was able to tune in today to listen to our wonderful conversation with Marie. And we thank you all so much. We do have exciting news for WellNurse. On May 6th, the first day of Nurses Week, we will be launching our open beta test for our mobile app. And so if you are interested, we will be sharing more information about how you could sign up and become a beta tester for our app. And so this would give you the opportunity to try out our app, see what you think of our practices, and hopefully we could build a great resource for nurses by nurses, and a great tool to help support nurses out there during this time, but to continue this practice afterwards as well. And so tune in, follow us on social media. I'm going to put our link here for our website. You could continue to follow us at wellnurseapp.com, and that includes all of our social media links as well. And we will also continue to have more of our monthly spotlights. So tune in, and as we approach May 6th, we will also have more news released about our launch, so feel free to tune in then. And until then, we would just like to say thank you all so much for being here, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.